We became nothing more than roommates because of her choices. She forgot she was a wife before she was a mother, and she never realized that a man can be starving for affection even in a house full of people. In my work as a structural inspector, I'm trained to look for slow onset failures. These aren't sudden explosions or dramatic collapses. They are the result of years of neglect. A small leak in the roof that never gets fixed. A foundation that settles just a few millimeters every year. By the time you notice the cracks in the walls, the building is already unsafe to live in. My marriage to Lena followed that exact blueprint. We didn't have a big fight. We didn't have a scandal. We just slowly, quietly, evaporated until there was nothing left but a shared mortgage and a cold bed. When we first got married, Lena and I were inseparable. We had a physical and emotional shorthand that felt like our own private language. We were lovers, adventurers, and best friends. But then, life happened. The kids arrived, the promotions came, and the house got bigger. Somewhere in the middle of all that success, Lena decided that our intimacy was a luxury we could no longer afford. She began to prioritize everything: the children's soccer schedules, the perfect organization of the pantry, her career milestones, except for the man standing right in front of her. I understood the pressure. I really did. I stepped up as a father and a husband. I did the dishes, I handled the bedtime routines, and I made sure she had time for her hobbies. But over time, I realized I wasn't being treated like a partner. I was being treated like a coworker. Our conversations became strictly logistical. We talked about grocery lists, school fees, and home repairs. If I tried to touch her, to pull her close for a moment of connection that wasn't about a to-do list, she would stiffen. "Not now, Thomas," she'd say, her eyes already scanning the room for something else to clean or organize. "I'm exhausted. Can't you see I have a million things to do?" I began to feel like a ghost in my own home. I was providing the resources, I was doing the labor, but the woman I had married had disappeared behind the mask of the mother and the professional. She wore oversized pajamas to bed every night, a literal and figurative barrier. She stopped looking at me with desire and started looking at me as a resource to be managed. Our bedroom, once a sanctuary, became a room where we simply recharged our batteries for another day of labor. I tried to talk to her. I told her, "Lena, I miss you. I miss us. I feel like we're just roommates who happen to have kids together." She would get defensive immediately. "How can you be so selfish? I'm doing everything for this family. You should be happy that the house is running so well. Is sex all you think about?" It wasn't just about sex. It was about being seen. It was about the small touches, the lingering kisses, the feeling that I mattered as a man, not just as a provider. But Lena had convinced herself that as long as the kids were happy and the house was clean, the marriage was fine. She believed that intimacy was something you could just put on a shelf and come back to in 10 years when the kids were grown. She didn't realize that a fire without oxygen eventually goes out. The loneliness became a physical pain. I would sit at the dinner table, surrounded by the noise of my children and the clinking of silverware, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. Lena would be scrolling through her phone, checking her work emails or looking at perfect home blogs, completely oblivious to the fact that the man sitting 3 feet away from her was drowning in silence. I started staying later at work, not because I had to, but because the silence of my office was less painful than the rejection I felt at home. I started going for long drives just to feel like I was moving somewhere, because my life at home felt like a stagnant pond. I felt like I was failing as a man, even though I was doing everything right by society's standards. I was faithful, I was hardworking, and I was a present father. But I was starving. The turning point happened on an ordinary Tuesday in late 2025. I had come home early, hoping to surprise her, maybe suggest we get a babysitter and just go for a walk. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw the house through the windows. It looked perfect. The lawn was manicured, the lights were warm, and the children were playing in the yard. It looked like the dream we had always talked about. But I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I knew what was waiting for me. A polite hello, a list of chores, and a woman who would look right through me. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the engine still running. I looked at my wedding ring. I thought about the 10 years I had given her, the way I had supported every one of her dreams while mine was slowly suffocating. I thought about the fact that it had been 6 months since she had even held my hand without it being a performance for the kids. And then, it just broke. The structural failure finally happened. I didn't yell. I didn't get angry. I just started to cry. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sob. It was the quiet, desperate weeping of a man who realized he was completely alone in a life he had built for someone else. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, my shoulders shaking, as years of accumulated loneliness finally flooded out. I felt pathetic. I felt weak, but I couldn't stop. I was a man who had been pushed to the edge of his emotional endurance by a good woman who thought her neglect was productivity. I didn't know that Lena had come out to the garage to get something from the freezer. I didn't know she was standing just a few feet away, watching through the tinted glass of the car window. I heard the car door handle click. I didn't have time to wipe my eyes. I didn't have time to put the mask back on. Lena opened the door and stood there, frozen. She saw my face, red and wet with tears. She saw the way I was clutching the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling into an abyss. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice filled with a shock that was almost insulting. What are you doing? Is everything okay at work?" I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't hide it. I didn't make an excuse. "It's not work, Lena," I said, my voice thick and broken. I'm so lonely. I'm so incredibly lonely in this house." She looked at me as if I was speaking a foreign language. She looked at the house, then back at me, her mind clearly trying to reconcile her perfect life with the shattered man sitting in the driveway. "But we have everything, Thomas. The kids are doing great, the house is finished, I'm finally on track for my promotion. I thought we were doing so well." "You are doing well, Lena," I said, stepping out of the car. I felt a cold, hard clarity. The house is doing well. But we haven't existed for a long time. You've been so busy being a mother and a manager that you forgot to be my wife. I don't want a roommate, Lena. I don't want a business partner. I wanted you, but you're never here, even when you're standing right in front of me. I walked past her into the house, leaving her standing in the garage, finally forced to look at the cracks she had spent years ignoring. The walk from the garage to the kitchen felt like crossing a desert. Even though I was inside the house I paid for, surrounded by the furniture we had picked out together, I felt like a trespasser. Lena followed me, her footsteps light and hesitant, a sharp contrast to the confident, commanding stride she usually had when she was managing our lives. I sat down at the kitchen island. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The dim glow from the microwave clock was enough. I didn't want to see the perfect decor. I just wanted to feel the weight of the truth. "Thomas, please talk to me," Lena said, standing by the sink. She didn't come closer. It was as if she were afraid that my sadness was contagious. "I had no idea you felt this way. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building this life together. We were building a life, Lena, but we weren't living one," I replied. My voice was steady now, but it had a hollow ring to it. "You built a high-performance machine. You optimized the schedules, you curated the meals, you perfected the children's extracurriculars. But you forgot that a machine needs fuel, and for a man, the fuel isn't a clean house or a promotion. It's the feeling of being desired. It's the intimacy of being known. I'm tired, Thomas. Do you have any idea how much I carry?" She snapped, her old defensive habits kicking in for a second. "I know exactly how much you carry, because I've been carrying the other half of it so you wouldn't have to," I said. "I do the chores. I do the kids' routines. I handle the repairs. I've done everything to make your life easier so that you'd have a little bit of energy left for us. But every time you had an extra ounce of energy, you gave it to your job, or your friends, or a new home project. You gave everyone your best, Lena. I just got the leftovers. I got the sighs, the complaints, and the back of your head in bed. She went silent. I could see her looking around the kitchen, perhaps seeing the cracks I had mentioned for the first time. She looked at the calendar on the fridge, filled with her neat, color-coded handwriting. There was a slot for everything, except for us. The following weeks were a slow, agonizing attempt at repair. Lena tried. I have to give her that. She scheduled date nights. She bought new lingerie. She tried to initiate touch. But it felt like a chore. It felt like another item on her to-do list, somewhere between buy milk and oil the deck. When she kissed me, she was looking at the clock. When she held my hand, she was thinking about her 8 a.m. meeting. You can't schedule desire. You can't manage passion back into a relationship once the soul has been neglected for too long. The final realization came a month later. We were at a dinner party for one of her colleagues. Lena was in her element, charming, efficient, talking about our wonderful life and our perfect kids. She was playing the role of the successful woman who has it all. I sat there, a fixed smile on my face, feeling the familiar coldness settle in my chest. On the drive home, she turned to me, looking energized by the social validation. That went well, didn't it? Everyone was so impressed with the house photos I showed. I looked at her, and I realized that she still didn't get it. She still cared more about the image of our life than the quality of it. She was addicted to the success of the marriage, but she had no interest in the man inside it. Lena, I want a divorce, I said quietly as we pulled into the driveway. The car screeched as she hit the brakes. The silence that followed was deafening. A divorce? Over what? I've been trying, Thomas. I've been doing the date nights. I've been more affectionate. What more do you want? I want to be loved, not managed, I said, looking out at the house that had become my prison. I want a woman who looks at me and sees her husband, not a roommate who helps her maintain her lifestyle. Your effort this past month has been the hardest part, Lena. Because it showed me that even when you try, your heart isn't in it. You're just trying to fix a problem, so you can go back to your routine. I don't want to be a problem you solve. I want to be the man you can't live without. The separation was clinical. Lena handled the paperwork with her usual efficiency. She organized the move, the division of assets, and the custody schedule with a terrifying precision. Even the end of our marriage was a project she managed to perfection. I moved into a small apartment downtown. It's not perfect. The walls aren't the right shade of gray, and the furniture doesn't match. But for the first time in years, the air feels warm. I started seeing someone new recently. Her name is Sarah. She doesn't have a color-coded calendar. Sometimes her kitchen is a mess, and she's often late for things. But when I walk through the door, she drops everything. She looks at me as if I'm the only person in the world. She touches my arm just because she wants to feel me there. There is no to-do list between us. I ran into Lena at a school event a few weeks ago. She looked perfect, as always, but she looked at me with a strange, hollow expression. I think she finally realized that she had won the life game but lost the person she was supposed to share it with. She had built the most beautiful house in the world, only to realize she was the only one living in it. I learned that intimacy isn't something you do when you have time. It's the foundation that holds everything else up. If you neglect the foundation to focus on the wallpaper, eventually, the whole thing is going to come down on your head. I'm not a roommate anymore. I'm a man, and that's a structure that can never be broken. It has been 18 months since I handed over my keys to the perfect house. In my work as a structural inspector, I often tell my clients that a house doesn't become a home because of the quality of the timber or the expensive finish on the floors. A home is a living thing. It requires heat, breath, and movement. Without it, the structure starts to feel like a museum, beautiful to look at, but impossible to live in. After the divorce, I watched from a distance as Lena tried to maintain the brand of Lena. For the first few months, her social media was a masterclass in resilient motherhood. She posted photos of the kids' perfectly packed bento boxes, the spotless living room, and her own smiling face at the gym at 5 a.m. She was showing the world, and perhaps herself, that she didn't need the dead weight of a husband who wasn't satisfied with a high-functioning household. But as someone who knows how foundations work, I knew the cracks were just being covered with fresh paint. The first time I saw the mask slip was during a custody handoff 6 months ago. Usually, we met in a parking lot, a clinical exchange of suitcases and schedules. But that day, I had to drop our son off at the house because he'd forgotten his soccer cleats. I walked up the driveway I used to power wash every spring. The lawn was still manicured. The windows were still sparkling. But as I stood on the porch, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. When Lena opened the door, she wasn't wearing her work suit or her gym gear. She was in a bathrobe, and for the first time in 10 years, the house behind her was quiet. Too quiet. The kids are at their practice, she said, her voice sounding thin. I forgot you were coming. She didn't invite me in, but I could see past her. The kitchen island was clear. There wasn't a single stray crumb or a misplaced mailer. It looked like a showroom. It looked like nobody actually lived there. And in that moment, I saw it in her eyes, the realization that she had finally achieved the total control she had always craved. There was no one to manage. No one to complain about the schedule. No one to demand affection. She had one, and she looked absolutely miserable. The house looks great, Lena, I said softly. She looked back into the hollow perfection of her living room. It's exactly how I wanted it, Thomas. Everything stays where I put it now. There was no triumph in her voice, only a haunting, echoing loneliness. She had built a temple to her own productivity, and she was the only one left to worship at the altar. The final closure came last month. I was at a local park with Sarah. It was a messy Saturday. We had been painting my new apartment, and we both had streaks of eggshell white in our hair. We were eating greasy burgers on a bench, laughing about a mistake I'd made with the roller. I felt light. I felt seen. I felt like a man who was allowed to be imperfect. I looked up and saw Lena. She was there with the kids for a school fundraiser. She was dressed in a coordinated outfit, holding a clipboard, orchestrating the event with her usual terrifying efficiency. She looked like a queen commanding an army. Our eyes met across the grass. I didn't turn away. I didn't feel the old guilt or the old starvation. I just gave her a small, respectful nod. Sarah noticed and squeezed my hand. It wasn't a possessive squeeze. It was a "I'm right here" squeeze. Lena watched us for a long moment. She saw the paint in our hair. She saw the messy wrappers on the bench. She saw the way I was leaning towards Sarah, not because it was scheduled, but because I couldn't help it. She saw a man who wasn't being managed, but a man who was being loved. In that look, I saw her entire worldview crumble. She had always believed that if she worked hard enough, if she was efficient enough, if she provided a perfect life, that love was a guaranteed byproduct. She thought intimacy was a reward for good behavior. She finally understood that she had it backward. You don't build a marriage to get to the intimacy. The intimacy is the mortar that allows you to build the marriage. I heard later from a mutual friend that Lena finally put the house on the market. She told people it was too much space, but I knew the truth. Every time she walked into that kitchen, she saw the ghost of a man crying in his car. Every time she looked at that color-coded calendar, she saw the list of things she prioritized over her own husband's heart. She realized that a house can be a prison even if the bars are made of gold and the floors are polished marble. My life with Sarah isn't a structural masterpiece. We forget things. We stay up too late talking and forget to set the alarm. Sometimes the dishes sit in the sink for 2 days because we'd rather spend the evening on the balcony watching the stars. My foundation isn't made of schedules anymore. It's made of moments. I still work as an inspector. I still tell people to fix their roofs and reinforce their basements. But now, when I see a couple arguing about the color of the tiles or the cost of the renovation, I want to grab them by the shoulders and tell them, the tiles don't matter. The renovation doesn't matter. Check your heat. Check your breath. Make sure there's still a we inside the house. Because at the end of the day, you can live in a shack with a woman who sees you, and you'll be the richest man on earth. But you can live in a palace with a roommate, and you'll starve to death in the middle of a feast. The house is sold, the roommate is gone, and I am finally, truly, home. Wow, that was something, wasn't it? I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm still processing some parts, so let's talk about it in the comments. I'll be down there waiting for your thoughts. Don't forget to like and share if you had a good time with me. See you in the next one.